podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Cricket Unfiltered. I'm one of your co-hosts, Menas. I'm joined, as ever, by Paul Dennett. Paul, how are you?
Hey, good. G'day, everyone.
And it is my great pleasure to introduce one of the good friends of the show. So this podcast has been going for 10 years this year, and I'm joined by Jon Norman from Talksport, the cricket editor, who's been coming on for, the best part of 10 years. Jon, welcome back.
It must be that time of the year, eh? There's something in the air. Finally, it stopped raining in the UK, and there's just that sense of excitement. Obviously, we had some big news this week, cricket-wise, but it's an absolute pleasure to be back on the show, and it just means one thing, doesn't it? It means we can lock horns once again ahead of what could be the best Ashes in the 10 years that the show's been going. I would say.
Wow, that's a big call early. So, the Ashes just under a month away. I mean, Jon, you mentioned the rain, so I want to start here. I want to start with your local expertise being a POM. My feelings around this series, because it's being played in June, July, that the weather could play a bigger part than is being talked about. Everyone's talking about baseball, everyone's talking about wickets, but in the end, if it's raining and it's cloudy overhead, the ball's going to hoop around, and whatever the groundsmen want to do, it's going to be good for bowling. And then the teams come closer together, baseball becomes harder to play, and then who knows what we could get. So tell me, what's your thoughts around the weather?
Yeah, that's a good call, actually. It's not one that I've really heard mentioned too much here. I find it interesting that you think that would bring the teams closer together. I think in some ways that would bring England more into the equation, because, of course, if the ball moves, and with Australia's record against lateral movement and the moving ball, England's strengths, you've got to say now, looking back very traditionally, back to the likes of Anderson and Broad and Robinson, rather than the out-and-out explosive pace of Wood, Archer and Stone. So yeah, I mean, it's such a difficult one to call with the weather, because it just seems like the whole world has just gone a bit crazy. I was in New Zealand in February, and it was just like being in England in February, to be honest with you. A couple of nice hot days, but there were cyclones, there was horrible weather. And then I got back to England, and it has been like being in England in the winter. This week is the first week that it's felt like spring. So what the weather is going to do in June and July is anybody's guess. I mean, the county championship started in April. I mean, I think Gloucestershire have lost the best part of two full 4-day games to the weather. It's been terrible. But yeah, if the weather does play a part, there's another huge area where I think it would come to England's aid if the matches were affected, and that is Ben Stokes' knee. Ben Stokes' knee. I don't know if you've seen him. Well, he hasn't played much IPL cricket, but I'm not sure if you've seen Stokes in the last 6 months or so. He's got a massive problem with his knee. It doesn't stop him bowling 12-over spells at times, but essentially, the problem with England's tactics is that they're going in with this idea that they're going to have one of Mark Wood, Jofra Archer, Ollie Stone in the side to bowl that enforcing role, the short pitch stuff, the short bursts. We know how it works. Now, we know Archer's out, sadly. We know Ollie Stone's definitely going to miss the first two, and I'm not sure how much he would have played anyway. Bryden Cast, a Durham seamer, tall seamer from the old school. They seem to just churn him out up there. He's out for the summer. So it's Mark Wood or bust. Mark Wood cannot play 5 test matches. That is for sure. So what that means is that Ben Stokes is going to have to bowl that enforcer role. He's going to have to be that player that's going to be banging it in. And that in itself is going to cause his injury no end of good. And if we do have these flat tracks, where we do have these high scoring encounters, we do have these 5-day games, with the back-to-back nature of things, I will be very, very concerned of the impact that would make on Ben Stokes' fitness.
Interesting.
It's an interesting one, because I think that the reason Menas was saying it brings them closer together, I think Menas is so bullish about Australia. He's saying that England are the rampant underdogs. That might bring
absolutely,
them...
yeah. I wanted to correct the record.
I was wondering. It's not like you, Menas, to be,
Yeah, because I think
To
if Australia plays you on flat decks, that's just like playing down under here, and it'd be
so I spoke to Rob Key yesterday, the managing director, and I said to him,
name drop
well,
already.
and I said to him, a month ago, Ben Stokes is quoted as in essentially ordering the ground staff up and down the country to prepare fast, flat pitches. That's what he wanted. And I said, do you still want that? Because, I mean, I personally, I don't think that plays to our strengths if half our bowlers are injured. And even if they aren't injured, it still doesn't really play to our strengths. And he said, the main thing is entertaining cricket. So there you have it.
It's it seems like there's almost a threshold that's been crossed, because obviously we always talk about how after they went behind the paywall in 2005 that a whole generation has been lost to cricket in England. But it was already a sport that it's never had the popularity in England that it does in Australia, certainly in the last many, many decades. But it almost seems like it's even dropped another cog to the point where they're just saying, we've kind of got nothing to lose. Let's go out and entertain. Is that an accurate summary?
I certainly noticed that cricketers are more famous in Australia, for sure. You only have to travel around, and in fairness, I haven't been to Australia personally for a couple of years, but essentially, who are the people, who are the faces that you see promoting products? And you do see them, don't you? You see the Adam Gilchrist popping up left, right, and centre. You see a lot of Australian cricketers as the face of products, and you don't really see that in this country. Cricket did disappear behind the paywall in 2005, and it's interesting that still 2005 that gets mentioned as the moment a lot of these current cricketers fell in love with the game, and that's what they want to do again. Has it dipped even further in terms of popularity? Is that why the likes of Brendan McCullum and Ben Stokes are kind of like risking all just to try and get that Trafalgar Square moment again? Possibly. Certainly the figures that were out this week actually, or last week from the ECB suggests that cricket is still a massively popular sport in this country. That all the Ashes tests are sold out. The attendance for cricket is huge.
If your grounds, you can only get 15,000 people in a day. So
yeah, but then we've got 18 counties, haven't we? And these. But we've got, if you look at county cricket compared to Shield cricket, they get massive. They get much bigger numbers. If you look at T20 cricket, and the 100, if we can throw that in there as well, they're massive numbers compared to what you get in Australia. So there is interest there. Whether it's a problem still in this country, yeah, I would suggest so. And would a 2005 type Ashes be welcome, even if it is still stuck behind the paywall? Yeah, I think it's needed. There is one other thing I just thought of off the back of that, and I would say that English cricket is probably, you may disagree, is probably better followed away than it is Australian cricket. So
definitely.
So in England, it may not have the peaks, but it has the consistency. It's still a 10-month a year sport, possibly even 12 months a year, because the county championship's been pushed to April now. So essentially, England are on tour for 5 months a year. The domestic season is 4 or 5 months a year. So yeah, it's still very visible sport, and it's never ever more visible than when the Ashes take place. It's still the only series that really transcends the game and stops people and gets people talking who normally would never bother with the sport.
Yeah, I mean, that 2005 is referred to regularly for good reason. It was just such an amazing series, and it did get that cut through. Even in Australia, it got more cut through than any other series that I've ever seen. Yeah, I noticed in the Times they the last couple of days they published a guide to the Ashes, which doesn't surprise me. But they're saying lunch break is 40 minutes and stuff that you would just never see in an Australian paper about. You might say about a minor sport here like rugby union or something. They might have a guide to how it works, but it's heartening to hear that it's still kind of ticking along stronger than it might look from outside.
Do you see some parallels between 2023 and 2005? Because I think I do. In terms of the quality that's going to be on show, and I can't believe I'm saying that. I wouldn't have been saying this 12 months ago when I think most English fans really feared the worst. I thought England were going to lose the Ashes quite comfortably, actually. So it still might. Yeah, I mean, it's a risk. It's a high risk strategy that is being employed by England. But you've got the quality there, and you've got the characters. I mean, the David Warner conundrum. Whatever happens with Warner, he is a character. He stands up there with the likes of Shane Warne and Ricky Ponting. These guys that used to come over here, and he's got that something about him. So I think England have got players now. Whereas before, I remember Ian Bell hitting 3 centuries in 2013, I think it was. And Belly was a brilliant player for us, but, he wasn't a character. But Ben Stokes is a character. Johnny Bairstow is a character. And this England team has now got characters, and Australia have got characters as well. And I think that's another parallel with what happened back in 2005.
I think also just the commitment to fast scoring. I mean, some of the... I always think 2005 was better than 1981, simply because although both of them played some amazing innings in 81, the general rate of scoring was slow. But England getting 400 plus on the first day at Edgbaston, that's something that was never seen before or since. But now it is possible again. So yeah, I can definitely see some parallels there, and I think it's the right way to play. That more often than not, playing with freedom without being reckless, you end up probably looking back and thinking that was the right way. That was the right way to play. If they'd played baseball in Adelaide in 2006, they wouldn't have lost that game.
Yeah, I mean, I was in Adelaide in 2006. I think that the whole baseball thing I was still having nightmares about it, to be honest with you. It was awful. I mean, it was like a 7-hour horror show. It was absolutely horrendous.
I backed Australia at 80-1. I loved it.
Well, so it's the only days play I've ever gone to where I brought a book. I'd just written it off as a draw. We would have been quite happy with that. After Ashley Giles put down Ricky Ponting on day 2, it was a draw all day. And then within about half an hour, I think it must have been, was it KP's wicket? I can't remember. It might have been even earlier than that. We were 1 down. And I remember the second wicket, there was just that sinking feeling in the Barmy Army. And we knew it was going to go the way it did. Anyway, what were we talking about?
Just aggressive scoring. But look, I think broadly speaking, to your point about it being a good series, I think this Australian side is better than the one that came in 2019. A lot of the same personnel, but more experience. Travis Head's a better player. Usman Khawaja is in better form. Marnus Labuschagne's, a world beater now. Plus the bowlers. So I think Australia's in good shape. Obviously, England's in very good shape. But then I guess
you've got a better captain as well. So Australia should have won in 2019 I mean, you can.
What was he doing at the Oval? What the fuck was he doing?
I have no idea.
But
2019, you can point to Edgbaston and say, well, if we're being in hindsight, I suppose if Anderson doesn't hobble off after 4 overs, England pretty much win that match. You would have thought. But Headingley, Australia win that match. 99 times out of 100, and I still can't believe that they bowled first at the Oval. I mean, that was just an absolutely incredible moment. So that should have been, and England come off the back of that World Cup. Don't underestimate how much that took out of them. It was their focus for that summer. They were there, but yeah, I agree. I think your batting is better than 2019. But
we've got the destroyer, Scott Bowler. Now we didn't have him last time. So I think we're in good shape. I think, England's in good shape. It's
and that's another reason why it's going to be a fantastic summer, isn't it? But both teams are in really good shape.
Hey, quick question. Oh, sorry, you go, Menace.
No, I was just going to say, Johnny, you particularly worried though about the injuries. A groin strain to Jimmy Anderson. Archer's already out, but. Yeah, Paul and I were saying in our last show that we had doubts Arch would ever be there. I don't know how you felt about that. Stokes with his knee, are these injuries now just on the cusp of the summer starting to concern you?
Massively. Anderson, Yeah, you're always going to be concerned about, but the same with Hazelwood, isn't it? Hazelwood's got injuries, and it happens. Pat Cummins could get an injury. You just don't know. Can England survive without Anderson? Probably yes, in a way that they couldn't have done before. Just because Robinson is going to play all five. He is an exceptional talent, and I think that he's got something to prove. He was, ridiculed, dropped, chastised. His career, really, he was at a sliding doors moment after the last Ashes. This would be quite a story to bookend that. He is a natural successor to both Stuart Broad and Jimmy Anderson. Broad will be thereabouts. So you've got an Anderson, Broad, and Robinson. You've got those three. If Anderson falls down, you do have Chris Woakes as well. But it's Stokes. He is the one for me. If he'll do everything he can. He reminds me of Flintoff a bit. You remember 2009 when he was he couldn't play at Headingley even though he wanted to. They just said you can't. Your leg's going to fall off pretty much. And it's just the way that he employs himself as that enforcer role. The way he's kind of, he leads from the front. If he is injured, that could be it for England. That's the one. That is the key one. He brings so much to that side. He is the conduit from Brendan McCullum to the team. He is England's best fielder. He is the best captain. He is the third string fast bowler. He's the one that makes things happen. And as we saw at Headingley, he's capable of reaching levels that no other player in the world, arguably outside maybe Steve Smith, can actually reach. So that's the injury. That's the one. If there's any concern, it's there.
With Stokes. Yeah, interesting. What do you think about the decision to leave Ben Foakes out of the test match against Ireland? And it seems like they're going to go with Johnny Bairstow with the gloves for the Ashes as well.
Well, there was no surprise. There was never, ever a discussion that Stokes could open, that Bairstow was slot in at 6. Bairstow was always going to play. Brendan McCullum said that back in February, I think it was. So Foakes has also dropped for a test match or rotated or rested or whatever against Pakistan. Ollie Pope was given the gloves. That told you everything you needed to know. And Bairstow's form, I mean, I was at Headingley in 2019, the greatest innings I've ever seen, the greatest test match I've ever seen. And 4 years on, I still can't quite get my head around what I saw that day. But you know what? Johnny Bairstow against New Zealand at Trent Bridge last year pushed it close. He was reaching levels of consistency as well that even Stokes hasn't managed, reeling off fourth innings centuries in huge run chases at great speed with all the shots. So you can see why he's back in. Whether he is still that player after that awful injury and whether he can also keep wicket, that when you're talking about concerns, that is another one. But I can see why the decision was made, but you've got to feel sorry for folks. Well, you might.
I might have missed it.
I don't, definitely not.
I might have missed it, but did you say that Stokes is not going to be opening? Is that still a possibility?
No. And there is the other concern. Zach Crawley will definitely be opening alongside Ben Duckett. The Ashes ends careers. We know that. And Line
said it. Line said it.
Yeah, he did. I mean, he said it in a way that maybe he probably regrets. But at the end of the day, there's going to be one or two Australian players who never play for Australia again at the end of this series. And same could be said for England. And, Zach Crawley is going to be under a huge amount of pressure. The one thing I'll say for Crawley, though, is that he comes into the side knowing that the Australian team probably have got a little bit of respect for him, maybe more so than some of the England fans, because he came into that 2021-22 Ashes side and he performed okay in the two matches he got at the end. Those fast, flat tracks that we're talking about, they would definitely suit him. And he is the kind of player that can take a game away from you. He is an explosive talent. And if it works one test in 5 and England win a test because of it, then maybe if they win one or two others, thanks to more conventional players or means, then it's seen as an absolute masterstroke. But whoa, it's a huge call and a big risk.
Yeah, very much so. I'm pretty confident against that combination. Just on sort of what's at stake, broadly speaking, John. I mean, this baseball's all been fine. You can have your fun against everyone else, but when it comes to the Ashes, if England gets towed up and it's a bit of a shellacking, which could happen, could all go up all wrong. All these, you can't keep chasing 400 on the last day. So if it goes wrong, what's at stake? I mean, could they just turf this whole mantra out the door by the end of the summer?
Well, the Ashes mean everything, and as you say, with the greatest respect, it's all well and good doing this against pretty much every other Test side in the world, but it may work against every other Test side in the world. But if it doesn't work against Australia, then there will be criticism. Of course, it depends how it happens. At the end of a buccaneering summer of cricket where two heavyweights have exchanged blows, and at the final day, in the final session, Australia get through to win 3-2 at the Oval in what is regarded as equal to 2005, then, there'll be disappointment, but there'll also be, respect. And I suppose the entertainment factor will outweigh the result. But if England are 2-0 down after 2 Test matches, a sequence of horrendously poor shots at horrendously poor times of the day, and they go down to 2 heavy defeats, and the Ashes is done, then I mean, not only will there be criticism of this series, but there will be questions asked about some of the stuff that happened in some of the Test matches that led into this one as well. We love to, build people up and knock them down again. And the Ashes is a perfect excuse to do exactly that if it all goes terribly wrong.
We've never done that on this podcast, ever.
Hey, just could I jump up one thing?
You go for it.
With I mean, Crawley, he's only 25, so maybe there's more upside. But just looking at his record, his batting average is worse than Chris Woakes. Why not open with Stokes and bring Woakes in? As an Australian fan, I'm scared of Woakes in English conditions with bat and ball. I'm not scared of Crawley.
I think that there's a real kind of, back to basics approach to how England have gone about playing their cricket. And they've the same as, well, not just playing their cricket, selecting their teams. For all the build up to the last Ashes, it was all about, can Jimmy Anderson and Stuart Broad really make it through? Should they be rested for the other matches? Said that they're ready for that. We need to see who's coming in from behind. And, Bairstow played at 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And Moeen Ali was the first spinner, second spinner, not a spinner, batter only. And then Rob Key came in, Brendan McCullum, Ben Stokes came in and said, whoa, let's just pick our best team, right? Let's just forget what's coming. Let's just pick our best team. Let's pick the best wicketkeeper, the best opener, the best number 3, the best bowler, blah, blah, blah. That's what they've done. And that's what they've kept faith with. And that's why they didn't even contemplate Chris Woakes opening, because that is square pegs or round holes or whatever the phrase is.
It's another one of Paul's crazy ideas, John. Just a ludicrous notion that we're never going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, funnily enough, Will McPherson in the Telegraph and even Steve Harmison threw it out there, Stokes to open. And that, of course, means that folks can play and Bairstow can slot in at 6. It kind of makes sense, but it goes against everything that this selection panel is all about. It's about just doing the basics right and letting everything else follow.
How optimistic are you, John?
Well, I'm more optimistic than I was 12 months ago. When you look at the run of form and results that England have been on, let's go back. What are we now? So it's middle of May 2023. Where were we? Middle of May 2022. Tell you where we were. England had just been dry humped by Australia again. And then they'd gone to the West Indies and they'd lost 1-0. Their record away from home over the previous 4 years was abysmal. They'd lost pretty much everywhere apart from Sri Lanka. And at home, they'd lost to New Zealand in 2021 at home. They were 2-1 down against India with that one test match, which was called off to play. They were in desperate sorts. There was timid leadership. There was nobody other than Joe Root was scoring any runs. There was an over-reliance on bowling in English conditions. It was defensive cricket. It was boring cricket.
And this is good. There's hope now. See, this is what I like to hear. There's hope now. This is so when the loss comes, it'll be more painful. This is great. I love this. Mate, fantastic.
Manners, Paul, you both had hair the last time Australia won a Test series in England. There's many, many changes in your lives aside from that.
I was on my honeymoon. honeymoon.
There we go. No children, hair.
Yes.
We hadn't. Donald Trump. I don't even know if we knew Donald Trump was back then. I mean, it was a different world. So yeah, of course, there's always a fear, huge fear that Australia are going to win here. I desperately don't want to see it this summer. But
I've also never lived through my team going away and losing 5-0 in an Ashes like 3 times in my lifetime. Is it 3 times in your lifetime?
5-0? He's not born in 2021.
At least twice.
Well, I saw every day. Every ball, every day, 2006,
really
07.
Good, great. Excellent.
But then I was also there in 2010-11 when we beat you in Australia. Yeah. So, and my hairline wasn't that different to what it is now. So, says a lot. But yeah, there's
there's hope.
There's hope. There's more expectation. But do you know what it is? There's excitement. I've honestly got more excitement going into this Ashes than I have had since 2005, I think. Wow. I think we have got in this country,
I can tell you seem excited.
Yeah, I am.
The ticket sales reflect it.
And I don't know what's going to happen. I knew what was going to happen in 2013, 2015, 2019. 2009 was a little bit of a after Lord Mayor's show. We've just been defeated 5-0, so I wasn't quite so sure about that one. But this one, I mean, this could go one way or the other. Really could. There's so many variables in there, and there's so.
I can't see you smashing us. Like I can't see you smashing us, but I could kind of see us smashing you now. Like just rolling over you like a dump truck. There's England cricket again.
Yeah, England cricket that has beaten you every time you've been here since 2001.
Except for 2019.
I know, yeah.
Well, even then, that was.
Well, you said we should have won, but you're right.
But hold on a second. Yes, the 2005 England won by a millimetre, 2009 by a centimetre, 2013 the 2 drawn tests Australia would have won. The first test they only lost by a fraction. They should have won in the one at Durham. Should have been 4-1 to Australia in 2013. And 2015 was 3-2. At the same time, we've had 5-0, 5-0, 4-0, and 4-0. And the fictional 2010-11 Ashes.
No, the 21-22 was a fictional one, wasn't it? According to Stuart Broad. Look, I can see Australia winning. Yeah. I can see Australia winning. I can see England winning. One thing I've found with your Australian side is you don't like. It's like the old Mike Tyson. Everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face. How are you going to feel when you get punched in the face? That's what I'm interested. That's what I'm interested to see. And
I actually think this team is pretty resilient under Andrew Menczel, Pat Cummins. Like they lack tactical nous. They can do some very silly things, but sometimes, if you're a bit dumb, it's easy to be resilient. And I think they kind of get that. Like,
what about the scars? One of the things that I always used to hear about was the scars. Nasser is saying he didn't want players in the dressing room who were scarred from their defeats against Australia in the past. And I know you've always beaten us, or certainly have for the last 10 years or so at home. But what about the scars? Is there going to be a feeling from, here we go again? when David Warner nicks off to Stuart Broad.
Oh, absolutely. Well, that's the thing. That's why I say if it's like cloudy and overcast and Australia's, 4 for 30 at lunch, then all of a sudden everyone's looking at each other in the dressing room. So I think that is a genuine concern. Like if Anderson gets on a roll and conditions suit him, you got left-hander at the top, Khawaja, Warner. So Broad and Anderson will be pretty confident against them. And then you've got the Rocks, Smith and Labuschagne. But then, Head and Green are sort of unknown quantities. I mean, Green's never played a series over in England. Head's in fine form and I think will do well, but there is an opening. You're right. If a few batting claps to start getting in there, but I just think it's going to be one of those series where both teams at certain stages will get the wobbles with the bat,
which is one of the reasons why Bairstow's in there. Because one of the problems England have got is essentially they do have a tail, So having Bairstow coming in at 7 is it does make sense. It does make huge sense. But yeah, I mean, I think I can see pretty much. I can see everything. Or the only thing I can't see. I can see results. I can't see too many draws. Yeah, I can see results.
Unless they're absolute belters, and then it's 500 players, 500. But I can't see that. What about
the spin? How do you see Nathan Lyon? Because from it's not like age is really a problem, but certainly his effectiveness against England diminished as the series went on. I haven't had a look at the scorecards, but I've got a feeling that he really was a problem. He was a problem at the start of the series, and less so as it went on. The England players certainly, I think they were starting to play him on the back foot rather than front foot, and they realised that was a better way to go about things. Obviously, you've just had the India series where you've got a couple of young guys coming through. And then we've got Jack Leach, who again is another interesting character in the way his development, nowhere near as successful as Nathan Lyon. Different types of bowlers, of course. But what kind of role do you think? What kind of role do you think Nathan Lyon's going to be playing in this series?
Paul, do you want to take this one, being head of the fan club?
The back catalogue of this. If you go back to listen to the back catalogue of this podcast, I've often been quite critical of him because I'm such a sort of a fiend for figures, and I just think that no one's forcing you to bowl off spin. So if you can't average under 30, I just sometimes think I'd rather pick another quick. But I would say I think that actually Lyon's probably in the best form of his career. I think he's bowling now as well as he has ever bowled. So I've come to terms with him being in the side.
But I guess, John, the big difference now is there's a genuine contender for the second spot with that young Todd Murphy, the off spinner that debuted in India. He's made for Test cricket. He's early 20s. He's the complete package. He really impressed everyone over there. So I guess if what you're talking about comes to pass in the first couple of tests and Lyon's effectiveness is diminished, more so than in the last series, we've actually got someone that they'd be confident to bring in who could do the job.
That'd be a big call, though, wouldn't it? To drop Nathan Lyon.
That's the thing. I think that there could be some big calls that are needed. That we just talk about the Australian quicks as a sort of a lock of Cummins, Stark, Hazelwood, and with Lyon as well. But as you said earlier, John, there's been question marks over Hazelwood's fitness now for the first time in a while. Like up until the last couple of years, he's been very robust, but it's that's changed a little bit. I as I said to Manners earlier, I'd be getting Nisa straight in there. I think I'd have Nisa as one of the first quicks I'd pick in English conditions. Plus his batting adds to it as well. So I think it'd be interesting that they got the selections wrong in 2019 and they didn't play Stark enough. I'd be tempted not to start with him though in the first test of the series and get Nisa in there and Boland. Obviously dependent on what the conditions are like, but I think Australia's selections of their bowlers is going to be interesting.
Yeah, that's a good shout because I think Siddle played 4 of the 5, didn't he, or something like that? But Nisa's he's basically providing the lower order ballast. I think he hit 84 again this week for Glamorgan. Took 8 wickets, and Sean Abbott as well. As a Surrey boy, watching he is and a top guy as well. Speaking to Gareth Batty about him, he was saying he's such a positive influence in the dressing room.
That's
He's
not a
really
name. Gareth Batty's not a name drop. Sorry.
okay. Are you sure?
Rob Key was barely. Rob Key was like just there,
you-
but
Well, okay, fair enough. I'll try and do better for the next one. But yeah, I mean
yeah, they're
that's
great.
That's a big difference, isn't it, between the two sides? That you've got Nisa and Abbott called into your squad.
Yeah.
We've had Cass ruled out with injury, with Archer ruled out with injury, Ollie Stone ruled out with injury, Anderson pulling up with a little niggle as well. Could that prove to be the difference come that fourth or fifth test?
All right, now, John, I know we're running out of time, so I've just got one question to end this.
5-0 England.
Oh, yeah, not a prediction. This is probably, which of the England players are going to retire at the end of the summer? Because I think as Australian fans, obviously, there's parts of me that's really just hates Jimmy Anderson, but I do also want to embrace, this will clearly be his last summer, and will Broad follow him out the door?
Great question.
Got to it by the end. Took a while.
They're keeping this stuff very close to their chest. I almost feel there's more likelihood of Stuart Broad walking away than Jimmy Anderson.
Interesting.
Okay. But it's going to be hard. I mean, say it's 2-2 with one to play at the Oval, or 2-1 up with one to play, England that is, and you can't beat. I was there when Ambrose and Walsh walked away from the game at the Oval. It is the ground where you kind of do it. I mean, will
it's like the SCG here?
Yeah, exactly. I was at the SCG when Warren, McGrath, and Langer did the same thing. And I was back there in 2008, I think, with Gilchrist's final series. I mean, next year I think we got Sri Lanka and West Indies. If you're going to go out, that's when you go out, isn't it? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if both of those bowlers decide to walk out if England win. The other, any other players in there? I mean, for you guys, I suppose David Warner. There's feeling that this might be his last series, come what may as well.
There's a possibility he won't play a test.
There is a possibility. Do you? So you feel it's all on the World Test Championship final? Is it? Is it down to him to get a score of note there? Otherwise, he's dropped.
That's the conventional thinking here. I'm not sure whether that's true, but that is pretty much what people are saying. Which seems a strange thing to base an Ashes
does seem a bit
decision
weird.
on. But I think there's a feeling that, as you said before, that when Broad comes onto him, he's just likely to nick off. Whereas that India aren't that same threat, and there's also, and I think this is strange, but there's a feeling that he's earned his spot in the final of the World Test Championship because he's part of the side that's got Australia to there, which that's a noble sentiment, but I think you should just pick your best 11, whether he's in it or not. Should be irrelevant. But it seems as though if he went into the World Test Championship final and got a pair, then he might never play for Australia again in Test cricket.
Well, that would be a shame. As much as I've enjoyed watching him and hated him at the same breath, that's what sport's about, isn't it? And I'll be surprised, to be honest, unless it really is a wretched old pair. I think if you get picked for that, it's your only warm up at the end of the day. Otherwise, you're going to drop David Warner and bring in, who would it be? Who is he?
Marcus Harris.
That's the
Marcus
problem.
Harris. That's a man, and he didn't do particularly well 4 years ago either.
Yeah, give me the choice of all of the alternatives, and I think I'd rather Warner without any shadow of a doubt. I think the potential upside of Warner is higher than the potential upside of the others. But just one other point you mentioned, it is sad that this is the first ever Ashes tour that there's not a single county game. It's kind
of... have to leave it there.
Yeah, well, he's dropped off right mid-sentence. It is sad that there's no county games. Well, John, look, thank you so much for joining me. I mean, it has been great to talk to you again.
Mate, thank you for inviting me.
We were just saying how sad it is that there's no county games as you dropped off.
Well, I mean, it is a shame, but that's the way of the world, isn't it?
Yeah.
And which is another reason why you'd think if Warner's in the first 11 for the World Test Championship final, he's going to be in the 11 because otherwise, what cricket would Marcus Harris have played?
Well, he's
if
over playing
anything.
over in England, but I guess the thing is
Oh, yeah.
Australia could change the squad after 2 tests. That's the thing. So anyway, look, let's wrap this up. It's been a lovely precursor to the Ashes with one of the good friends of the show. So if you're looking for another cricket podcast, it's following on Talksport. Jon Norman, also Neil Manthorpe, friend of the show, Steve Harmison. So often in
Check
my
us out.
rotation to listen to. But yeah, John, thanks for joining me. Great stuff.
Anytime, guys. And as I say, cannot wait for this series. But if Australia do find themselves 2-1 up, 3-1 up, maybe if they even win it, just don't message me.
I definitely will be. I definitely will be. Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
This is a Piccolo podcast production.
Sports Social Podcast Network.